We've all felt that, haven't we? That little pull, maybe a big push to take control, get our way, be the one in charge.
Yeah, that drive for dominance.
Exactly. But what if, real influence, the kind that actually lasts, doesn't come from throwing your weight around?
What if it comes from something quieter?
That's what we're digging into today, this idea of fulfillment that's, it's beyond just using force.
Right. We're looking at Chapter 30 of the BFG Handbook. That's the Christian edition of the Tao Te Ching.
Okay.
So it offers a unique perspective and how those things connect.
Okay, so our mission then for this deep dive is to unpack what this chapter is really saying.
Yeah, get into the core ideas.
We want to see what it tells us about genuine influence, how we actually achieve things, and leave a meaningful legacy.
And we'll connect it back to Christian teachings, but also those broader truths you sometimes find echoed elsewhere.
The source also brings up this Trinitarian method, MAP for renewal. Mindset, aim, practice.
That's right. We'll see how that framework, mindset, aim, practice helps us understand the chapter's themes.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump in. Where does chapter 30 start?
It starts strong. It says, "Those who rely on God to advise the ruler maintain control of the world without weapons, for all who draw the sword will die by the sword."
Straight away it's saying control without weapons. That's counterintuitive.
Very.
And that line, all who draw the sword will die by the sword, that rings a bell. That's Jesus in the garden, right?
Exactly. Peter pulls out his sword, and Jesus tells him to put it away. The chapter even points to Matthew 26 there.
So let's use that MAP framework. What's the fundamental mindset here?
The core mindset, I think, is a clear rejection of force, of violence as the first resort.
It's about choosing peace.
Yeah, adopting that perspective first. And it's interesting how practical that feels. Think about daily life, an argument flares up, or there's tension at work.
Right, your gut reaction might be to push back hard, to assert yourself forcefully. But this mindset suggests pausing.
Exactly. Hit pause. Look for a peaceful way forward. The text mentions applying this in leadership, in relationships.
Like maybe suggesting mediation in a workplace conflict instead of just laying down the law.
Precisely. So if that's the mindset, rejecting force, seeking peace, what's the aim?
What are we striving for?
The aim is to actively try to resolve conflict peacefully, to consciously avoid using force.
Actively try. So it's not passive.
No. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone.
As far as it depends on you. Okay. So the aim is really about working towards harmony, not just avoiding a fight.
Yes. So in practice, that means maybe de-escalating things when they get heated.
Trying for respectful dialogue instead of, shouting.
Yeah. Using words, not metaphorical swords. Which leads us to the practice. How do we actually do this? The practice is consistently choosing that peaceful path over the conflictual one. It means getting better at conflict resolution.
Developing those skills.
Yeah, approaching disagreements with patience, really trying to understand where the other person is coming from, making a conscious effort day to day.
That practice part feels key. It's not just a nice idea, it's about the actions.
Absolutely.
Like the source mentions, really listening in a conflict, showing empathy, maybe giving feedback at work constructively, calmly.
Or keeping communication lines open at home, even when it's difficult. It's about embodying that peace you're aiming for.
Okay, so starting point. Reject force, aim for peace, practice peace. Where does the chapter go from there?
Well, it then looks at the consequences when we don't choose peace, when conflict happens anyway.
What does it say?
It uses this really vivid imagery. Wherever army troops camp, thistles and thorns grow. In the wake of a great war follow years of famine.
Oof. Thistles and thorns, famine. That paints a bleak picture.
It does, doesn't it? It highlights the long-term destruction. It's not just the battle itself, it's the barren aftermath.
It really drives home that conflict has these deep, lasting negative effects. So what's the mindset shift needed here?
I think the mindset is about truly recognizing those long-term costs. The economic hardship, the trauma, the loss.
Things that go way beyond the initial dispute.
Exactly. And because you recognize those costs, you're motivated to seek peaceful and, importantly, restorative solutions instead.
Restorative. Heal the damage, not just win.
Precisely. The text points to James 4 about the source of quarrels and Matthew 5.9, blessed are the peacemakers.
So the real-world application of that mindset is thinking ahead.
Yeah, thinking about those ripple effects before you escalate something. Prioritizing peace building in your own sphere.
Like exploring compromise before you draw a line in the sand in a negotiation or an argument.
Which brings us to the related aim.
What are we aiming for if we have that mindset?
The aim becomes broader. To actively contribute to a world, or at least your world, that's more peaceful and sustainable by consciously avoiding conflict and its fallout.
It connects that personal choice to a bigger picture.
Right. It mentions James 4 again, and that really hopeful image from Isaiah 2.4, beating swords into plowshares. The aim is constructive, about building peace.
That feels significant. It's not just about avoiding the negative, but aiming for a positive outcome.
Yeah, and practically it means considering those long-term effects and decisions, focusing on civil discourse even when you strongly disagree.
Okay, and the practice that follows.
The practice is embodying that aim, consistently choosing actions that build peace rather than fuel conflict.
So maybe stepping back from an online argument before it gets nasty.
Could be. Or getting involved locally in things that promote understanding between different groups.
Actively practicing patience, focusing on the underlying issues in a disagreement, not just the surface anger.
Exactly. Being that force for peace in your daily interactions.
Okay, so we've got rejecting force, understanding consequences.
Yeah.
Then the chapter shifts, you said, towards leadership.
Yes, it turns to the nature of leadership and purpose using the figure of the master. Listen to this description. The master fulfills his purpose, then stops, and does not take advantage of his power to reach domination. He fulfills his purpose but does not boast. He fulfills his purpose but does not take glory. He fulfills his purpose but is not arrogant. He fulfills his purpose but only by necessary means. He fulfills his purpose but without force.
It's defining leadership by what it isn't almost.
In a way, yes. It's rejecting the ego-driven, power-hungry model. The focus is on fulfilling purpose, quietly, effectively, leading with humility, serving others instead of seeking personal gain, and just doing the work, fulfilling your purpose without needing applause.
That feels radically different from a lot of what we see.
It is. The chapter points to Matthew 20, Jesus talking about the greatest being the servant, and Philippians 2 about having the mindset of Christ, valuing others.
And for purpose.
For purpose, it references 1 Corinthians 10.31, doing all for the glory of God, in Matthew 6, about not practicing your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them.
Okay, so real-world examples of this mindset. For a leader, it might be someone who mentors their team, empowers them, rather than just giving orders.
Definitely. Or someone who takes responsibility when things go wrong instead of blaming others.
And for a personal purpose, it's about focusing on the meaning of the work itself, maybe, not just the external rewards or recognition.
Exactly. Finding satisfaction in the act of creation or service, not just the outcome or the praise. So what's the aim here?
If the mindset is humble service and quiet purpose.
The aim is to consistently lead that way, to make humility and service your goal in leadership. And for purpose, the aim is to fulfill it effectively, but without boasting or needing the spotlight.
So aiming to empower others when you're in charge.
Yes, and aiming to act selflessly in your own contributions, focusing on the task, not the ego.
It's a shift from being driven by, look at me, to look at the work or look at the need.
Precisely. The scripture references stay the same. Matthew 20, Philippians 2 for leadership, Matthew 6, 1 Corinthians 10 for purpose, and the practice.
How do you practice this kind of humble leadership and purpose?
Well, the practice is consistently acting from that place of humility, serving others through your actions, fulfilling your purpose with a quiet confidence, letting the results or the service itself speak.
So maybe practically it's a manager actively seeking and valuing input from everyone on the team.
Could be. Or someone volunteering consistently in their community without seeking any office or title or public thanks.
It's about the inner motivation and the outward action reflecting that humility.
Right. It's doing good work or leading well because it's the right thing to do, aligned with your purpose, not for external validation.
Okay, that's a really different model of influence. Then the chapter broadens out again towards the end.
Yes, it concludes with a kind of zoom out, reflecting on the nature of power itself, especially compared to God.
What does it say?
It states, strong forces become powerful for a period of time, but they will come to an end. This is contrary to the everlasting God. That which is contrary to God soon ends.
A reminder of impermanence.
Exactly. All the empires, the powerful movements built on force, they have their moment, but they don't last forever.
Only God is everlasting. So the mindset here is about perspective.
I think so. Acknowledging the temporary nature of human power, even at its strongest, and focusing instead on God's enduring reality and will.
It encourages you to invest in things that last, maybe.
That's a good way to put it. Prioritizing internal values over short-term gains or fleeting power. The chapter points to Revelation. passages about God being the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, and also Psalm 103.19 about God's kingdom ruling over all, and Matthew 24.35. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
So the real-world application of this mindset is focusing on integrity, justice, kindness, things that have lasting value.
Yes. Making decisions based on those deeper principles, not just on what seems powerful or advantageous right now, keeping an eternal perspective.
And the aim that flows from that.
The related aim is to actively focus on those eternal values in your life and work, to try and align your actions with God's will, understanding that human power structures are temporary.
Again, grounding your choices in something bigger than the immediate situation.
Right. Psalm 103 and Matthew 24 are referenced again here. It's about aiming for alignment with the eternal, not just success in the temporary.
Focusing on sustainable practices, maybe. Things that build lasting good rather than just a quick win.
That fits. Which leads to the final practice.
How do you practice living with this eternal perspective?
The practice involves cultivating patience, recognizing things unfold in God's time, avoiding excess, not getting caught up in the temporary highs of power or success, and consistently acknowledging God's eternal power over fleeting human strength.
So practically,
Yeah,
maybe resisting the temptation to cut corners for a quick result.
could be. Or staying true to your core values even when it's unpopular or seems less effective in the short term.
It's about anchoring yourself.
Exactly. It's about where you place your ultimate trust and focus.
That brings us near the end of the chapter's main points. But you mentioned a respond section.
Yes, and this is really fascinating. The handbook includes this section that explicitly draws parallels between the chapter's themes and teachings from other major world religions.
Oh, interesting. So it connects these ideas outwards?
It does. It highlights similar threads concerning nonviolence. You find strong advocacy for it in Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, alongside Christianity.
Right, like the concept of ahimsa in Hinduism.
Exactly. And it does the same for humility and leadership, pointing out similar values in Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam.
So the idea of servant leadership isn't unique then?
The expression might be unique, but the core value of humility and leadership resonates widely. Same for patience, avoiding excess, selfless fulfillment of purpose, and understanding the temporary nature of human power versus the eternal.
Wow. So these core ideas, nonviolence, humility, patience, selfless purpose, eternal perspective, they really echo across traditions.
And the respond section uses this to emphasize connection, shared values, our common ground.
That's powerful. Can you give an example from that section to be how one of these plays out across traditions?
Sure. Take nonviolence. We discussed the Christian basis. The respond section might mention Gandhi's use of Hindu ahimsa for social change, or the Buddhist emphasis on compassion leading to non-harming, or Islamic teachings on striving for peace. Jihad often being misinterpreted solely as holy war when its primary meaning is struggle, often internal.
And seeing those connections helps.
It shows these aren't niche ideas, but perhaps fundamental human wisdom recognized in different ways. It can foster mutual respect and understanding. Another quick example. Humility in leadership. Christian servant leadership finds echoes in Buddhist detachment from ego, or Islamic emphasis on rulers being accountable to God and the people. We see this in leaders, spiritual or secular, who genuinely seem to prioritize service over self-aggrandizement.
It really broadens the context. Wrapping up our deep dive into Chapter 30, what are the main takeaways?
I think the core message is pretty clear and quite challenging, actually. True fulfillment, lasting impact, it doesn't come through force, through domination.
It comes from the opposite.
It seems so. It comes from humility, from self-restraint, from aligning yourself with a purpose bigger than your own ego, connecting with God's will.
So for you listening, hopefully this exploration has given you a fresh way to think about these big questions. Power, purpose, what truly lasts. It's a unique blend, drawing from this Christian Tao Te Ching perspective.
And it leaves us with something to reflect on, doesn't it? Maybe think about one area in your life, just one where you might be leaning on force or trying to dominate, or maybe just pushing your own agenda really hard. And then ask yourself, what would it look like to bring more humility, more of a servant spirit to that specific situation? What might change? It's a path the chapter suggests leads to a deeper, more lasting kind of fulfillment, something to ponder.